Let me. Okay. All right. Thanks for making it not just me here. Ken was, in his introduction, he said I was going to talk about the fig tree, and then I thought, I forgot. It wasn't the subject I forgot about, but I forgot I have a fig tree at home, and I was going to bring a branch of that just to show you, but it's totally bare now, no buds or anything on it, that so to speak. But fig trees are interesting because they can bear fruit 2 or 3 times a year, and so you get this cycle going, and they will, when the spring is starting to come on, the buds swell, and you can actually see the fruit developing before the leaves are actually there. So, any fig lovers here? Oh, a couple of you. Good. So let's open our Bibles, if you have your Bible with you, to Matthew 24. And the parable of the fig tree is found in verse 32, starting with verse 32. But before I go there, what I want to do is just, being as we're going to be having a week-long study here on this Matthew 24 and 25, and also I think it was the book of John, is it, Ken? Yeah, and covering the last words of Jesus to his disciples before he was crucified. I wanted to quickly just cover chapter 24, just go through the highlights here and talk about give us some background on what happened, where they were. So if you go back in your chapter to verse 1 in chapter 24, and it talks about Jesus departing from the temple. So they were in Jerusalem, obviously. They're at the Jerusalem temple there. And then he talks about things happening to the temple. Not one stone won't be left on top of another. And then they walked to the Mount of Olives. And this is one of the places they really like to be and relax. And it had a view. Some of you might have seen pictures of the Mount of Olives, how you can see the Jerusalem temple across, kind of a little valley right there that you can see across to the temple. And then after that, starting in verse 4, you see warnings of deception. And Jesus is talking about how others will come and claim that they are him. They'll come in his name, and he tells them, well, don't be deceived. It's not that it won't be him. And then he starts launching into these things that we all look at as evidence of the soon return of Jesus. And we all are disturbed by these wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, famines, pestilences, earthquakes. Now we think of pestilence, the Ebola virus going around right now is big in the news, things like that. And he says in verse 8, all these things are the beginning of sorrows. So all of these things were happening way back when. Wars have been going on for many years. Even before Jesus' time, there was wars going on. So this is something that happens all over the earth. And then the idea of false prophets coming, lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. We can probably see that today too, can't we? Things happening. And then in verse 14, there's the final evidence, and that is, some of us know this by heart, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So that's kind of like the final thing that's to take place, the final sign. Some of us look at things like 3ABN and how the signals beamed all around the world now. How amazing it is that they can have a program like that, and it's not just them. There's other organizations like the Hope Channel. These things are going around the world, and people are receiving them in various places of the world that might not have a knowledge of the gospel. So this is going out there. And then after that, there's the talking about the Great Tribulation taking place. And it's kind of a dual prophecy there, because it talks about the abomination of desolation, talking about Daniel the prophet. And in Daniel chapter 9, when you see this, it says, verse 15, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Now, this could be the prophecy that pointed to the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, when they were surrounded by the Roman army. So there it goes on talking about that part of the prophecy, but it also can be a dual application for us in these days, in these last days. Some of these things can be happening right before Jesus comes. Let me see what else I wanted to cover here. So verses 21 through 28 are more of the signs of Jesus' second coming that might be more to our time period. This period of tribulation. And even it's in verse 22 it says, "And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. For the elect's sake, those days will be shortened." So that's a good promise that God's not going to let us go through something that we can't get through. He will be out there looking over us. And the warning of, this is one of us, many of us who may have gone through Adventist schools would hear this next verse. "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'there,' do not believe it." They talk about, he's out in the desert, or he's in this other place. Don't believe it. And that was a thing that you could easily cement in your mind and say, well, that's a sure sign for me. I know I'm not going to be fooled, because this is what he's going to appear in a cloud in the sky. He's not going to be coming back before secretly. He's going to come with a loud noise, and every eye will see him. And that's talked about in verse 27. It says, "For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man." And verse 29 is kind of interesting. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Again, those of us who grew up going to Seventh-day Adventist school, I'm not trying to single you out, but you've been hearing this a lot. I look around the room. I know many of you have been the same as me. Started church school as a little child and learned all of these things. And we know when we have our prophecy seminars, we put this on and we talk about the Great Lisbon earthquake in 1755, the stars falling from heaven in 1833. All of these things are signs of the end. And yet, look at where we're at today, 2015. It's still going on. And we think, well, when is it going to happen? When is Jesus going to come? So we get down to the parable of the fig tree. And I had a thought about the parable of the fig tree. Well, he tells all this things that's going to shake up the disciples. All of these fearful figures in their mind that they're seeing take place. The tribulation, the stars falling, the way things are in the world, the lack of love and hate for one another, all of these things taking place. Who can take it? And then he comes to this parable of the fig tree, and he says, verse 32, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors." I was thinking also of the seasons. 2 weeks ago, we crossed a little milestone. Anybody know what that was? Right. The shortest day of the year, the shortest daylight time of the year, the winter solstice. And So when that happens, a lot of people get excited because they know that summer's going to be coming back, the warm weather. Right now we're going through real cold nights. Any of you protecting your plants like me? Yeah, putting things over your plants to try to keep them alive. It's been so cold at night. But if we think about in a spiritual lesson of this, are we getting to the point where the darkest day of this earth's history is upon us? Our parents, maybe some of our parents grew up Seventh-day Adventists. And the reason I keep pointing this out is because the time frame that we hear these messages over and over again. How many of us, I know looking around the room, some of you were classmates at MBA, and you went through these meetings at the school, week of prayer meetings like we're having here. Speakers coming up telling us we're in the toenails of time. That goes back to Daniel chapter 2, the image of the in Daniel that Nebuchadnezzar set up. Remember how it had the different parts, and it got down to the feet of iron and clay that would not cleave one to another. The different when each part of that image, the head of gold, of course, was Babylon. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but each part had a different kingdom that was the power of the world at that time. Then you get down to this feet of iron and clay, and you think, okay, there it is. It's Europe. And you have people like Hitler trying to reunite Europe. We even have the European Union right now with their own currency, and yet they still squabble among themselves. And so we're thinking now, if we look at the prophecies, and we've heard, I know for myself, I've sat in meetings, in church meetings, in religious meetings, where people that are now dead are telling me, this is the last days. It could not go on much longer. I remember a man that came and stayed at my house during camp meeting one year. He felt that George Bush, the second George Bush, was going to be the last elected president. Well, we know we're past that. And what happens is a lot of people grasp onto these news-making things, and they say, this is it. This is it. This has got to be it. We can't go on much longer. And yet, the time on earth keeps going on and on. And we're wondering, well, how much longer will this world last? So let's go on in the chapter here. I'll just quickly finish out my portion of it that I was assigned. It says, verse 34, assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. Verse 36, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until that day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. What promise do you see in there, in that passage? What kind of promise is in there? Anybody pick up on it? I'll give you a hint. Verse 35. What is it? What's the promise there? It's sure. It will not pass away. So all the promises he's made to us will come through to us. So when we see these things happen around us, signs happening, and we have our whole life to look at these signs. You know, I remember one of them was, well, it only takes one or two more states to vote on having a constitutional convention. And then if that happened, that would surely bring in the Sunday law. And as a Seventh-day Adventist, looking for a Sunday law was a sure sign. It has not happened yet. It could, but it hasn't happened yet. And so I don't know. I mean, how much longer can it go on? And as I was studying this in preparation for this, I had a couple of questions that I thought about. Why did Jesus lay out these warnings for us? Why did he want to lay out these warnings? Is it to scare us? How about to scare us into obedience? That would be a good motivation. How about to scare us into heaven? How about to give us an inkling of that his word is true when we see these things happen? That sounds like a good one. When you think about preparing for heaven, one of the things I thought about too is, what is our motivation for being ready for his return? Is it, I don't want to die eternally? I'm working as hard as I can to get there. I'm following the commandments. I'm doing, I go to church each week, yeah, and I participate. What is the motivation there? And it has to be love, doesn't it? It has to be love. The love relationship that we have with God, that we love him who first loved us. Yesterday during our Sabbath school class, there was something that that struck me, and that was in, if you want to look at in Proverbs 3, verse 6. In Proverbs 3:6 it says, "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." And some of you have a Bible like mine. I know Ken has one. And in this Bible, there's little quotes from some of Ellen G. White's books. And I wanted to read this to you because it really struck me in how she put this. And I thought, if Jesus did this, can I not do this also? I challenge you to think in this context. Think about this idea. Many are unable to make definite plans for the future. Their life is unsettled. They cannot discern the outcome of affairs, and this often fills them with anxiety and unrest. This is quoting from Ministry of Healing, page 478 and 479. Let us remember that the life of God's children in this world is a pilgrim life. We have not wisdom to plan our own lives. It is not for us to shape our future. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after received for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. Christ in his life on earth made no plans for himself. Imagine that. Christ made no plans for himself. He accepted God's plans for him, and day by day the Father unfolded his plans. So should we depend upon God that our lives may be the simple outworking of his will. As we commit our ways to him, he will direct our steps. Too many, in planning for a brilliant future, make an utter failure. Let God plan for you. As a little child, trust to the guidance of him who will keep the feet of his saints. God never leads his children otherwise than they would choose to be led. If they could see the end from the beginning and discern the glory of the purpose which they are fulfilling as co-workers with him. So, she's talking about us not making plans for our life. That's a very difficult thing to do. And to say, well, I'm not going to make any plans. I'm just going to wake up in the morning and say, God, what do you want me to do today? Very hard to devote your life to God in that way. And I also think of Jeremiah 29, my favorite memory text here. Jeremiah 29, 11. Let's see. 11 through 13. It says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." The heart is the seat of the emotions. The brain is the seat of knowledge, but the heart is the seat of emotions. And when we get that love connection with Jesus, it'll affect our hearts. And if you, like I said, if you had the same Bible I have, the one thing that struck me in this was Ellen White's comment from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 129. She said, and this is a hard one to do, God permits trials to assail his people, that by their constancy and obedience they themselves may be spiritually enriched, and that their example may be a source of strength to others. The very trials that task our faith most severely and make it seem that God has forsaken us are to lead us closer to Christ, that we may lay all our burdens at his feet and experience the peace which he will give us in exchange. So, trials come. Each of us have had trials in our life, and difficulty where we can't see the other side of the darkness. But Jesus is there waiting for us, and he's holding out his hand to us. I wanted to close with a little story, because years ago, and this will be kind of interesting to some of you, this was back when I was 21. I had one daughter, and we were living in Hayward at the time, and the pastor there, my wife and I decided to talk to him about, well, should we have any more children? And we weren't sure, because we thought, well, Jesus is coming soon. We shouldn't be carrying on and having more children. We should just stop at one. So he told me the story. He said a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, there were two couples. One couple, they were talking about having children. One couple said, no, we think Jesus is too close. We're not going to have any children. The other couple said, he might be close, but we're going to go ahead and plan our lives as if he's not coming tomorrow. So they went ahead and had children. And I believe they had 7 children. And their last name was Maxwell. Anybody heard of Arthur Maxwell? The man that wrote the Bible story books? He's long dead. And all of his family members were involved in the church. Some of them were pastors and teachers. One was the principal of PUC at one time, I remember. So I gathered from that one thing. That is that, let me see if I can find it where I wrote it down here. And that is, plan your life like he is not going to come back soon, but live your life like he is coming tomorrow. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we think about the prophecies that we're going to be looking at, the teachings that Jesus is telling us in these final days of his exhortation with his disciples. Thank you for your time. Oh, you want that?
Thank you, Keith. Fig tree. Just by looking at it, you know what the season is. Jesus wants us to know what the season is for our own good, but we still need to be able to look for it so that we can be ready and not be deceived. Tonight, we'd like you to break into groups of 2 to 4 people, no more than that. Pray for each other. Pray for the strength to be able to see what God's plan is, to be ready for what's going to face us in the future, and talk to each other for just a little bit, and then we'll have prayer, and then we'll close at the end.